The power of a photograph or video is on full display in this video, as we explore the haunting story behind each one. From an eerie last image to an astonishing feat that ended in tragedy. Join us as we look at 5 haunting photographs and videos. But be warned, some of these stories are truly chilling. Uruguayan Flight 571. This is the last image of passengers on Uruguayan Flight 571, taken on October the 13th, 1972. At the time, none of them could have imagined that one or more of the friends in this video would be eaten by their comrades in order to survive. The chartered flight from Montevideo, Uruguay to Santiago, Chile, later crashed in the Andes Mountains. The plane was carrying 5 crew members and 40 passengers, including members of the Old Christians Club rugby union team, as well as friends, family, and supporters. The crash resulted in the immediate deaths of 3 crew members and 9 passengers. Another 5 passengers and crew died during the first night, and the remaining 28 survivors used plane debris to shelter themselves from the freezing conditions. Sadly, 3 days later, another survivor succumbed to the extreme weather. The crash site was at an elevation of 3,570 meters in the remote Andes Mountains of western Argentina. Despite multiple search and rescue overflights, the white fuselage was not spotted in the snow, and after 8 days, the search was called off. The group learned that the search had been called off through a small AM transistor radio. The survivors had very little food to eat, and knowing no one was looking for them, they faced certain death from starvation. In desperation, the survivors gave each other permission to use their bodies for food if they died. Left with no alternative, the survivors survived by eating the bodies of their dead comrades. On October the 29th, 17 days after the crash, an avalanche killed 8 more people. Some of the survivors decided to go on an expedition to seek help, but their efforts were unsuccessful, and they soon returned to the main group. 3 more passengers died, with the last one passing away on December the 11th, in part because he refused to eat human meat. Nando Parado and Roberto Canessa, both members of the rugby team, faced the harsh reality that they would all perish without help, so on December the 12th, they embarked on a desperate journey across the mountains. Using materials salvaged from the plane, they navigated slopes ranging from 30 to 60 degrees. Their journey led them to a ridge at 14,774 feet west of Mount Sellers summit. After traveling 33.5 miles over 10 days, they finally found help in Chile. When the news broke out that survivors had emerged from the crash, the story of their 72-day ordeal drew international attention. The survivors told the press they had managed to stay alive eating cheese and other food items they had brought with them, and after these ran out, local vegetation. However, it wasn't long before their cannibalism surfaced, and false rumours circulated that they had killed some of the survivors for food. On the 26th of December, 2 pictures of a half-eaten human leg taken by members of the Cuerpo de Socorro Andino were printed on the front pages of 2 Chilean newspapers. The survivors initially faced public backlash, but after they explained the pact they had made to sacrifice their flesh if they died to help the others survive, the outcry subsided and their families became more understanding. 16 people managed to survive for a full 2.5 months after the initial crash, and their agonizing decision to eat flesh from the bodies of their dead comrades almost certainly saved their lives. Their ordeal became the basis for a number of books and films, including the bestseller Alive by Pierce Raoul Reed, which was adapted for the big screen in 1993. The Argentine authorities and the victims' families decided to bury the remains of the victims at the crash site in a common grave. 13 of the bodies were whole, while the other 15 consisted of only skeletal remains. Notorious Firsts. This photograph is of John Jack Gilbert Graham being prepared for execution in the gas chamber at the Colorado State Penitentiary on January the 11th, 1957. Justice being served for perpetrating the United Airlines Flight 629 bombing that killed his mother and 43 other people on board. John Gilbert Graham, known as Jack, was born on January the 23rd, 1932 in Denver, Colorado. After the death of his father, he spent most of his childhood in an orphanage due to poverty. However, his mother, Daisy, came into money after marrying for the third time, but left her son in the orphanage, a decision that likely cost Daisy her life. Jack was estranged from his mother until he was 22 years old, by which time she was a wealthy businesswoman with a thriving restaurant called King's. In 1955, the restaurant was destroyed in a suspicious gas explosion, later believed to have been deliberately caused by Jack, who had insured the restaurant and collected on the property insurance following the explosion. On the evening of November the 1st, 1955, United Airlines Flight 629 took off from Denver, Colorado's Stapleton Airfield, bound for Portland, Oregon. On board was Jack's mother. Minutes after the plane's departure, it exploded, killing all 44 people on board. After investigators reassembled fragments of the plane, the FBI determined that items of Daisy's luggage had contained explosives. Based on that evidence, as well as physical evidence found at Jack's home, and finally a confession, he was charged with sabotage, then later murder. His apparent motive was to claim $37,500, equivalent to $430,000 in 2023, worth of life insurance money from policies he had purchased in the airport terminal just moments before the aircraft's departure. On May the 5th, 1956, Graham was convicted of the murder of his mother and was sentenced to death. Jack was executed in the Colorado State Penitentiary gas chamber on January the 11th, 1957. His final words were, "As far as feeling remorse for those people, I don't. I can't help it. Everybody pays their way and takes their chances. That's just the way it goes." Jack Graham was not only the first person to blow up a US commercial airline, but his trial was also the first to be aired on US TV. Grave with a View. This video captures the last resting place of little Merritt Beardsley. The story behind how his grave came about is heartbreaking. In 1865, at the age of just 8, little Merritt Beardsley was afflicted by an incurable illness, and despite his tender age, he knew he was going to die. Merritt lived with his mother and father in Oxford, New York, and just days before his passing, he confided in his father his fear of being entombed in darkness. Following his untimely death, his mother Sarah and father William Beardsley decided to honour their child's wish and chose not to bury him in the pitch black. Instead, they placed a stone resting place into a bank and included a small window so that the morning sun would always shine through onto their son. Years later, the boy's parents were laid to rest beside him. For many years, they all rested peacefully until the 1970s, when vandals wrecked little Merritt's tomb, reaching into the grave through the window and scattering his bones throughout the cemetery. And if that wasn't bad enough, police later discovered the boy's skull in the bedroom of one of the vandals. The tomb was replaced and Merritt laid to rest once more, but unfortunately, vandals continued to break the glass and desecrate the grave. It wasn't until 2013 that Stephen Foster became fascinated with the burial site and worked hard to restore it to its former glory. And today, the glass window has been replaced with plexiglass, and the interest in the story of the little boy buried there has been renewed and piqued the public's imagination. Eerie Nutty Putty footage. This eerie footage was uploaded by Dave Buchanan and shows the inside of the infamous Nutty Putty cave. Take a look.
No, I just, oh, actually I'm almost there. My light just fell out. fell out?
Well, it fell out, so I had to put it back in.
Oh. Are you filming this?
Yeah.
Cool. Sorry, man. Sorry.
Dave had gone to the cave in 2005 with his young son, brother-in-law Quinn, and his 2 kids. Quinn was the one filming. At the start, you can see just how small the entrance is. 4 years after this video was shot, John Edward Jones crawled into the same tiny opening, took a wrong turn, and never came out. John became trapped upside down in a narrow tunnel he mistook for the similarly tight birth canal passageway, around 400 feet, 120 meters from the cave's entrance. He found himself unable to move. Several rescue attempts failed, and after 28 hours in a headfirst position upside down, John suffered a cardiac arrest due to the strain placed upon his body. The video shows just how tight it is in there and what an incredibly difficult job the rescuers had in trying to free John. Rescuers concluded it was too dangerous to retrieve his body, and it was agreed that as a memorial to John, the cave would be permanently closed with his body sealed inside. If you want a more in-depth look at John Jones's plight, take a look at our video, The Tragic Story of John Jones. Angus Barbieri. This photograph is of the same man, Angus Barbieri. His remarkable transformation was attributed to fasting, but sadly, there was no happy ending. Today, over half of the Western population is overweight, and the global health and wellness industry is worth billions of dollars. More than ever, people are looking for that perfect body image and are willing to spend thousands on gym memberships and supplements that promise quick weight loss. However, back in the 1970s, it was unusual for someone to be morbidly obese. In fact, the term probably hadn't even been heard of, so the options available to Angus Barbieri weren't as vast as the ones we have today. Angus was born in Scotland in 1939. His father owned a fish and chip shop, where Angus eventually went on to work when he was old enough, and this likely contributed to his chronic overeating and addiction to food. By the time Angus was 27 years old, he was 32 stone, 2.5 times the average weight of a man in Scotland. The excess weight had a negative impact on his health, and he consulted with doctors who agreed that something needed to be done to control his uncontrollable appetite. Surgery at the time was risky and had a high fatality rate, so Angus was advised to fast. As he was a food addict, he needed help to do this. So in June 1965, he admitted himself to the Royal Infirmary of Dundee for a period of fasting assisted by doctors and nurses. The doctors recommended regular, short periods of fasting for Angus, which is similar to what we know as intermittent fasting. To everyone's surprise, Angus found it remarkably easy not to eat and sailed through the first 40 days without touching a crumb of food. He needed to address his body's lack of nutrition, so he took prescribed vitamins and yeast tablets and drank electrolytes. After an initial 40-day fasting period, doctors planned to send him home to start eating, but Angus preferred to continue fasting. He resumed the fast at home, with regular monitoring from doctors. Due to his lack of food intake, his bathroom habits also changed drastically to only once every 40 days. In the following months, doctors were amazed to see that Angus was not experiencing any negative effects from his fast, and they were shocked by the amount of weight he was losing, about a pound every day. On July the 11th, 1966, Angus finally reached the 180-pound mark, a significant milestone considering he had been overweight for most of his life. This meant he had to start reintroducing food back into his life. After 382 days of no food passing his lips, he had a small meal that made him feel full. By now, Angus was almost unrecognizable, as the before and after photos show. Angus Barbieri's well-documented fast was met with plenty of skepticism. Some people refused to believe a human could survive without food for over a year. Others suggested that the long-term negative effects of his fast would outweigh the positive effects of losing weight. Today, almost 60 years after Angus's incredible challenge, his year without food remains the longest fast ever, and his feat was included in the 1971 Guinness Book of World Records. After reintroducing food back into his life, Angus maintained a healthy weight. However, he had a short life, and in 1990, at the age of just 51, Angus died. Naturally, people speculated that his year-long fast resulted in his early demise. This theory has never been proved or disproved.